Now, chances are you're probably going to remember this from Algebra 2. Okay, I hope you do, because we don't have a lot of time to get into it. All right. So, properties of logarithms. Now, this can also apply for natural logs. Okay? But the idea is, what we're going to get into is we're going to solve logarithmic equations pretty soon. And we're going to have to use properties in order to do that. So, the main thing that we use these for is if we have two logarithms that have the same base, like both of these have the same base of b, okay, is that we can combine these logarithms. Okay? Now, we don't actually add it, but let's see if you can go back and remember from Algebra 2. What do you actually do with the two logarithm values? You multiply. Okay? So this would just be the log of x y. Okay? As in like x times y.
So you read the b off?
No. And really the base really doesn't matter. It's going to stay the same. Now, here's one thing that if you can evaluate this logarithm, you need to do that. All right? But you're not going to be able to evaluate all of them, especially if you have an unknown. Now, this is called, and you don't have to know the properties here, the names, you just need to know the application. This is called the product property. Okay? The other one here is going to be called the quotient property. And so I'm just going to change that to minus. So when we subtract two logarithms, what are we going to actually do with the x and the y? Divide. Okay? So this will be log base b of x divided by y. And now let's look at this last one here. The last one I'm going to have, let's say we have y times log base b of x. No, this is a property. Okay. So what does the property say here that I can actually take y and do with it instead of multiplying the logarithm? Right. This is called the power property. So it'll be log base b of x to the y power. Now, we're going to do two things with these properties today. All right? We're going to use them to like condense a logarithmic expression or expand it. So if I'm going to condense, that means I'm going to start with like two logarithms and squeeze it down into one by using my properties. Or if I expand, that means I'm going to start with one logarithm and expand it into 2 or 3 or 4 logarithms. Okay? Now, usually the better application is condensing, because that's what you're going to use when you solve equations. Okay? So you're actually going to do the condensing like the second part of the homework. Okay? Now, and I need to give that to you. Now, let's start with these. So let's look at this idea of condensing logarithms. Okay. So we're going to condense our logarithms into one, and if we can evaluate it, then we're going to do that. Okay. So let's look at this. We got log of 5 plus log of 2. Okay, these are really simple.
Okay.
All right. What's the understood base? 10, right. So there is a base, it's just understood to be 10. Now, what are we going to actually do with 5 and 2? Multiply. Okay, so that would make it say, what, log of 10. Okay, now, if I can evaluate this, I'm going to do that. All right, now if I can't evaluate it, that's okay, but if I can evaluate, I'm going to do that. Now, what would this actually be equal to? Right, 10 raised to what power would be 10? 10 to the first power. So this is actually just equal to 1. All right, we'll go back. Remember this. We're trying to think, well, what is this equal? because I can evaluate this one. What's the base down here? 10. 10 raised to what power is equal to 10? 10 to the first power is 10. And that goes back to this. And look, you know, I know this is the second time I've been through this today, but I kind of get tired of showing y'all this. B to the y equals x. Okay? If that is not obviously apparent by now, since you've had it in Algebra 2 and now you've had it in pre-calculus, hang it up. It's not going to get to you. Okay? Now, let's look at this one. That was kind of mean, but that's just the way it is. Okay? Now, let's look. Let's do another example. Okay? Now, this one we're not going to be able to evaluate. Right? But we're going to use a different property this time. By the way, this is what the product property, right? Let's do log of 2x plus 5 minus the log of x. So we're going to condense them down into one logarithm. So what are we going to actually do with this expression and this one? Divide. Okay? So it's going to be a single logarithm. So it'll be the log of 2x plus 5, all right, divided by or over x. Okay? Now, can we evaluate this one? 10 raised to what power is equal to this? I don't know. Okay? So I'm only going to evaluate the ones that I can. And the way the directions phrase it is they say evaluate the ones you can do without a calculator. Now, let me do one more condensing problem here. This I like this condensing problem because it like involves everything. Okay? All right, this is going to be like kind of long. So we got like 2 log base b of x plus 3 log base b of y minus 4 log base b of z. So it's like 1, 2, 3 logarithms. Okay, so what I'm going to do is condense them down into one. Now, what you're using here is just using all these properties. And you're going to use every single property in this one. So, like with the plus sign, this is mean I actually do with like the x and the y. Multiply. The minus sign means you actually take the y and the z and you would divide them. Now, I'm not mentioning something here that we got to do something else with. What about the 2 and the 3 and the 4? Right, we can make them powers. Yeah, exponents. Okay. Now, what do you think needs to happen first? Right, because, and the reason is you want to make them powers is you have to follow the order of operations, right? Okay, you would do powers before you would multiply or divide. So let's change all these and let's make this 2 and this 3 and this 4 powers. So it would be log base b of x squared, right, plus log base b of y cubed minus log base b of z to the 4th. Okay, now we've got the product property and the quotient property. So is it always like you multiply first and divide second? You do whichever one comes first. All right. So multiplying would come first. So I'm going to multiply the x squared and the y cubed, and then we're going to divide the z to the 4th. Okay. So it's just going to be x. There's powers are going to be in there. All right. So I'm going to have one logarithm, log base b of x squared y to the 3rd, and that's like multiplication. It's x squared times y cubed, and then divided by z to the 4th. Okay, so notice what? I took 3 logarithms, and now it's only 1. Now, all right, we always do this in math. No. We learn how to do something, and now we're going to learn how to undo it. All right, so that's what we call that condensing. All right, let's look at some here that we would expand. And the same rule applies here where if we can evaluate a logarithm, we want to evaluate it. So let's do log base 4, 64 over y. Okay, let's try this one and expand. All right. So now, this right here, this is like division, right? So how can I take it and like expand it? Change to subtraction. Y'all follow me? Okay. So this would be log base 4 of 64 minus log base 4 of y. Okay. Now let's expand it. Now take a look. Is one of these maybe I can evaluate? This one? Now I don't know what this one is, but we can think what 4 raised to what power would be 64? 4 to the, what 4 squared would be 16, so it's not 2. 4 to the third would be 64. So really this is just what number? 3. 3 minus log base 4 of y. Alright, now, yeah. Well, just come up here in a minute and you can do this. Now, what about, how would this change here what if it looked like this? Log base 4 of 64 times y.
And you have to add it in.
Right. And so the only thing that would change here was this would be plus. Okay. All right. Let's try one. Now we're gonna add a radical to this one. All right. So let's see what you can think about. So log base 4 of, let's say, square root of x over 64. Okay, so let's think about what will we do here. Now, with radicals, we never want to write a radical with a logarithm. We always want to write it with a rational exponent. So what's the same thing as writing square root of x? 1/2, right? X to the 1/2 power, right? Now, let's separate them. So we're going to separate them with what? Subtractions. We get log base 4 of x to the 1/2, then what? Minus log base 4 of 64. Right, that's just going to be 3. Now, what can I do here, though, with the power? Yeah. What? What's the power property say? We can take this power and move it to the front, and now it's going to multiply. Right? So you get 1/2 log base 4 of x. See, what are we doing? We're trying to expand it, right? So that's going to make it long. Anything that we can evaluate, we're going to try to do that too. Right. Now, do y'all remember talking about all those properties last year? Number 2. Now, ultimately, what we're getting to is these properties are going to help us solve equations. Okay? They're going to help us solve logarithmic equations. Now,